They should have recasted T'Challa. I don't get it. It's so stupid. Kevin Feige's stupidest decision was not recasting T'Challa. Black Panther Wakanda Forever was one of the most emotional films that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has ever done. You can definitely tell this was done by Ryan Coogler. This is his filmmaking. This is some of the best filmmaking I've seen the MCU do. The story is great. There's a lot of great things going to it. But I'll say this right from the start. T'Challa should have been recasted. The recast T'Challa movement was right from the beginning. I think this movie was missing a lot of T'Challa, but I'm gonna get into that review. Just let me give you my first quick out of the theater review that I put out on Twitter. And again, follow me on Twitter if you want to see these out of the theater reviews. That's where I'm gonna be putting them. So here's what I put: Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is an emotional thrill ride that has some of the best filmmaking the MCU has ever produced. Namor was great, and Letitia Wright stole the show. However, it was missing someone: T'Challa. Full review later today, and now this is that review. So let me just get straight into it. I really like this movie. It was a really good movie. It's a great movie, I would say. Do I love this movie? I love parts of it, but I don't love the movie as a whole. I really liked it. It's nowhere near as good as the first Black Panther film. I think that first one was just way too good, and I think it was just because of T'Challa. Chadwick Boseman was just that great that the first film just felt so much better just having him there, his presence, his heart, and everything. But before we get into that, let me get into the positives of this film. Uh, the side characters you see established in the first Black Panther movie, I love that they're put in the forefront. They're put in the front. You got Okoye, you got Queen Ramonda, and you got Shuri. And by the way, this is a Shuri story. Now, for a while in the movie, for like a couple of minutes, it seems like they're not going that route. And that's one of my criticisms. I'll get into that in a bit, but let me just go straight up with the positives. Letitia Wright stole the show. There's no hesitation about that. Letitia Wright's acting. By the way, I'm not too familiar with her acting. I only really know her about Death of the Nile and the Black Panther movie. I don't really know her much outside of that. But Letitia Wright in this movie did things I did not even know she was capable of. There's emotional scenes. There are scenes in this movie that compels you to her, and it is her story. The Black Panther Wakanda Forever should have just been called Black Panther Shuri Forever or something like that, because Shuri definitely stole the show. Her acting was immense. She is incredibly talented, and I just couldn't believe that this is the same character we saw in the first Black Panther film. I did not know she was capable of doing this. She was just a side character who was supposed to be comedic relief. And you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Better Call Saul. Saul Goodman, of course, known as Jimmy McGill in the Breaking Bad universe. In the Breaking Bad show, he's just this comedic relief who helps out Walter, but then he got his own show, and you could see Bob Odenkirk's acting just stole it. He was great, he was phenomenal, and that's what I would use Letitia Wright as comparison. Letitia Wright was the Saul Goodman of the MCU, and I loved it. She was great, she was phenomenal. There's so many great scenes in this movie, and I'm not saying this movie is not a top 10 MCU movie, but I'll say this. There are scenes in this movie, and not just one or two. I'm saying like three, four. There's like four or five scenes that were so good that if I had seen those clips alone, I would have thought definitely best Marvel movie of all time because the acting's great. And that's my number one thing that I love about this movie. The problem with Marvel in the last couple of years is comedy over everything. It's like they would specifically have comedic moments in movies that just didn't make sense. Like Thor: Love and Thunder had way too many jokes. There's a scene in Shang-Chi where there's a joke put after an emotional moment. And that's the thing I like about this movie. This movie lets you sit with it, which makes me believe that Ryan Coogler had far more authority on this film than he did on the first one. And that's the thing I really liked about this, that the movie actually took itself serious. Even the very beginning. By the way, the MCU intro in this movie is probably one of my favorite MCU intros, the tribute to Chadwick. And yes, especially the first 10 minutes of this film are really a tribute to Chadwick. It kind of feels like a funeral, but it also feels like a celebration of, hey, thank you, Chadwick, for the moment. Thank you for what you've done for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I love that. It was emotional, and it's quiet. It's just, shh. It's like, don't worry about anything. Just think about this one thing, and you flow with it. And you just feel what the characters are feeling. And that's the one thing this movie I really loved about it, was it took itself serious, and you could genuinely feel the sadness and the emotion of not having Chadwick Boseman. You could tell, the movie is really, while it's not all about grief. The way they handle the topic of grief is amazing because Queen Ramonda is like, hey, he's not dead. He's with the ancestors. But Shuri, what I like is that Shuri challenges that. Shuri isn't about tradition. That's the difference between her and T'Challa. Is that T'Challa was all about tradition, but changing things up. Shuri was like, nah, screw tradition. Tradition as there's science. There's this. There's that. And I love that from the beginning this movie gets you. The first act of this film is amazing. The third act of this film is amazing. And the action in this film is great. So if you're just in there for the action, if you're like some John Wick fan, then trust me, you're going to get that. The action in this movie is great. It's nonstop thrill. And there's stakes in it. That's one of my criticisms of the MCU. One of my criticisms is sometimes the fights don't feel like there's any stakes because it's just CGI punch, CGI punch, CGI punch. But in this movie, there are moments where like you don't even know if this character is going to make it out. And this reminds me of James Gunn's Suicide Squad. A Marvel film I would say close to this is Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness. Anytime Wanda chased down the the heroes of the movie, Doctor Strange and everyone, and that's the thing I love about this movie. This movie took itself serious. The movie knew when to be serious, and the action was great. It was phenomenal. Now there is comedy in this movie, so don't just go in there thinking, "Oh, this is gonna be a sad, depressing movie." No, there is some jokes in there, but what I like is that this reminds me of, like a Zack Snyder film or The Dark Knight, where, yes, there's jokes, but they're very subtle. They feel like something the characters would say. Because one of my problems with Marvel's comedy is, while, yes, some of it is funny, there's just a lot of jokes in these Marvel films that just feel like random. It feels like they're looking at the audience and saying, hey guys, we're funny. Remind us that we're funny. Oh, you guys can't handle serious topics? All right, let's have some funny in there. And that's what I like. And again, when it comes to grief, I like how you see the characters differently conquer their grief in a different way. M'Baku has a different from Okoye. Okoye has a different from Shuri. Shuri has a different from Queen Ramonda, and I like that. The visuals in this movie are pretty good. They're not like... There's a scene, Talocan. Talocan visually looks beautiful. And this movie doesn't really focus too much on Wakanda. And I'm not... Like, it focuses on the characters we know, like Okoye, Shuri, Queen Ramonda, a bit of Nakia. This movie does focus on them, but it doesn't focus on Wakanda as a whole. But one thing I did prefer about this film over the last Black Panther film is you got to see the citizens of Wakanda. One of my problems with these films is they're not showing you what is it like to live a normal life in Wakanda. How are these citizens reacting? But in this film, you do see the citizens struggle. You see the citizens going through it hard. Now, while I wish they still would have a story of the citizens, what is it like to live in Wakanda, I still liked it. I still like what they gave us. And I hope that future we do get to see the citizens of Wakanda. They're the ones that live there. What is it like to live in a country that was anonymous to the entire world for, centuries? And I like that. The VFX in this movie is great. It's definitely an upgrade over the first film. The first film, while it looks stunningly great, a lot of the VFX just wasn't on par because a lot of the VFX team was more focused on Infinity War. Right now, of course, they're not making Avengers movies, so they don't really have to worry about that. But still, and Angela Bassett, phenomenal. But now let's get into, while it's not my best part of the film, I still think Letitia Wright is the one that stole the show. Let's talk about one of the positives, and that is Talocan and Namor. Zeno Huerta, by the way, chef's kiss. It was a great actor, and as a Latino, I feel kind of pride and proud of this character, coming to life with this culture, and it's very comic accurate. To my comic book fans, who, and by the way, I won't spoil it to the general audience that don't know this, but if you know what Namor's name is, if you know the meaning to Namor's name, boom, you got that. Namor's origin too. Boom, you got that. Namor is accurate, but he's very violent. He's brutal. I would even say he's kind of like Black Adam. He's just brutal and violent, and he doesn't care. He'll do whatever it takes to do the things for his people. And the first time you go into Talocan, looks beautiful. The culture, everything. The soundtrack in this movie is great, but not because of the Rihanna song or for this song or for that song, but because the scores. We already have the scores for Wakanda. Those scores are great, but the scores for Talocan was phenomenal, and it was great, and I loved it. But especially when you first see Talocan for the first time, it was just phenomenal. It looked beautiful. It looked stunning, and you saw the humanity in these people and the citizens of Talocan, and you kind of come to understand why Namor feels such passion for these people. About seeing how his people You know, the Mayans, the Aztecs have gone through all this shit for centuries, and he has this grudge against the surface far more than King Orm did in Aquaman. And that's what I loved about this. And I want to see more of Namor. I feel like we do need more Namor. But yeah, this movie was great. It was phenomenal. Like, those are the positives I had to say. But now let me get to the negatives. And I'm going to go slow into these. I don't have too many negatives, but I do have negatives. Number one, this movie is way too long. You should have trimmed out 20 minutes of this film. I apologize, but this movie, way too long. 20 minutes, boom. I shouldn't have. There was just moments in this movie where I was like, all right, come on. And I'm not saying it's a slow movie. I'm just saying there's like moments in this movie that aren't going to the pace. You know, it didn't fit the pace that it required. And at points, it kind of felt like they wanted to make this movie long because it is nowadays a cool thing to have your movies be really, really long. That's what she said. Yeah, you should have cut 20 minutes. Specifically in the second act. The first act of this film is fantastic. The second act of this film is great. But that middle act really is where it struggles because it feels like the movie didn't know where to go. It kind of just felt like the movie was like, oh, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this, that. It was kind of going everywhere. Like, it's like it didn't know where it wanted to go. It still had a cohesive story. It's just that there were so many side plots. You know, you had Everett Ross, who I liked him in the movie. He just wasn't in it too much. It also felt random that he was in the movie because it was kind of just like, hey guys, you know, the one white guy from Black Panther, ha, hey, yay. But you know, I still thought he was great what he got, but still, you know, the second act of this film was just kind of feeling like, you know, randomness, action, boom, boom, boom. I'm not saying it's a bad act, but I'm just saying, hey, you know, the second act just wasn't it. Another negative I have is Riri Williams. And if you notice, when I was talking about the positives, I didn't bring up Riri Williams. Ironheart. Now, I will put out a full disclosure. I have never picked up a single Ironheart comic. I know she's a very recent character, and I know she's getting a Disney Plus show, so there is more to look for her. She wasn't all that great. What I mean by this is, how does a 19... So they explain to you that she's very intelligent. She has built stuff. She has a lot of equipment. But I just kind of felt like it was so surreal. Like, I know this is a fictional movie that has underwater people invading a third world country in Africa with all this technology. I know it's already a bizarre concept. You know, there's literally a guy with wings on his feet, you know. But it just felt a little weird. It felt on the nose. It was like, you know, her, first of all, the acting was okay. It was, I don't really know the actress for her, but she was mid. The character herself was mid. She just wasn't all that compelling. You didn't feel much for her. Even when she was about to die, I wasn't like, oh no. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. I know. Of course, she doesn't die. That's not a spoiler because we are getting a Disney Plus show. But it's just, she just wasn't that interesting. She wasn't very compelling. We didn't really get into her origins. There was like little sneak peeks. And I understand, don't show her her origin. Save that for the show. But she just wasn't all that interesting. She wasn't all that compelling. She just wasn't entertaining. I used the same comparison for Civil War. Black Panther, Spider-Man, they were both introduced in that film, and they were compelling. They were understandable. You understood these characters, and you liked them, so that when you saw them on their own solo projects, you felt excitement because you already established your enjoyment of the characters. With Riri Williams, I didn't feel that way. With Riri Williams, it was just kind of like, okay, secondary character. First of all, where does she have the money to build all this shit? And second of all, yeah, how are you this smart? Like, I get her being smart, but like this smart, and you're 19. Where did she study? Like, by the way, I've never read a Riri Williams comics because she's very modern. I don't really pick up a lot of modern comics, but still, I was just kind of like, where do you get this? Where do you get this all? But still, my biggest criticism, and I know this one's going to sound odd, is this movie was missing one major thing, and that is King T'Challa. I'm not saying Chadwick Boseman. It did miss Chadwick Boseman, but you could fix that. It was missing T'Challa. There was way too many moments in this movie that I was like, this moment would have been better if it had been T'Challa. I know some people are going to say, oh, Isaac, you're biased because you've been recast T'Challa from the beginning, and that is true. When Chadwick Boseman passed away, a month after he did, I uploaded a video saying, hey, while we are going to remember T'Challa, or not T'Challa, Chadwick, while he was great, he's a phenomenal actor, he did great things, he played Jackie Robinson great, he was in 21 Bridges, he was a phenomenal actor, and especially Black Panther was culturally a very loved character. I still believed that they should have recasted, continue the story that Chadwick Boseman started. I guarantee you he would have wanted that. And I'm not speaking for him. I'm just saying, he started something. And I feel like he would have liked to have seen that character progress. And even in the movie, it just doesn't make sense how he's gone for 5 years and then he comes back and he's dead. And now you're supposed to expect that the world never knew what the world was. Like, this movie never addresses that, too. The movie is just kind of like, oh, Chadwick passed. And I get that's a big deal. But he's been dead for 5 years and no one knew he was coming back. It's like, wait, why is it just now a big deal? And I get it. It's for Chadwick. And while I love the emotional scenes, they were great. They were fantastic. Not Chadwick. T'Challa's story still hadn't ended. You can still get another young black man to play the character of Black Panther. Give the role to another black actor. Give it to them. They deserve a chance. T'Challa's story shouldn't have ended. And this movie would have been far better if it had had T'Challa, because you missed that heart. The side characters are great. Letitia White was great. I'm proud that these characters were able to stand up and carry this movie without Chadwick. But at the same time, he is your main character. He was the heart and soul of that film. That Black Panther movie wouldn't have gone the right way if it didn't have T'Challa. And I would say the same thing about this one. This movie felt like it could have been this great, compelling story of, a Godfather 2-esque story of Namor being pissed that T'Challa revealed himself to the world. Because while that is one thing that Namor hates. Namor hates that T'Challa, revealed his secret because now it's affecting Talokan. I would have loved if he could have confronted T'Challa himself instead of being like, your son messed up something from us. And that's the thing that this movie was missing. It was missing that. Shuri is a great character, yes, but this movie's story would have been far better if you had T'Challa. He was the heart, he was the soul of the first film. People love that movie, not just because Shuri was a funny character, not because Killmonger, Michael B. Jordan was talented and all that. They loved it because you found the story of this kid who saw his father die in front of him, having to continue the mantle of Black Panther, having to be a king. That was the whole first film. But then in this film, he's just gone, and now you have to see Queen Ramonda take over the kingdom of Wakanda. And that's the thing this movie was really missing. This movie really needed Chadwick. I'll say this right now. I've even more recast T'Challa now than I was before the movie. It was just missing. It felt empty. It just felt... I get the tributes. I get everything. But it was just missing T'Challa. And I believe there's other actors that can portray T'Challa. Whether you get yourself a John David Washington, Jonathan Majors, or any actor that we don't know of yet. You could have gotten anyone who could fill that role. And I get it. I know the tributes. I know the emotions. But this movie, they should have rescheduled it. They should have done it some other time. And just waited, think about it, and, take some time to properly get T'Challa. Because this movie would have just functioned so far better with T'Challa. Every time Namor confronted anyone from Wakanda, all I kept thinking was, imagine this with T'Challa. This would have been so much more impactful. And I was thinking, man, this could have been Godfather 2. I'm not saying as good as that film, but the story itself could have felt like a Godfather Part 2. The first one felt like Godfather 1, where Corleone, Michael Corleone, is just rising to power for the first time. That's what T'Challa was doing. He was rising to power in Wakanda. He was becoming the king. He became the king, while Michael was slightly different. He was becoming the Lord, the Godfather. He was becoming the face of the Corleone family. And then in Godfather 2, it was about establishing his power, continuing what he had begun. That's what this story should have been about. Instead, that's one thing I didn't like. This movie had this idea of, the world now knows Wakanda's secret. How do they go with that secret being known? People are trying to steal their vibranium. They're doing this, they're doing that. But it's almost kind of sidelined because T'Challa passed. Or not T'Challa, but he did pass in the movie. And I didn't like that. It's still a very beautiful movie. It's a very emotional movie, but because of not having T'Challa, it's just not a top 10 MCU movie. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's the best comic book movie of the year. I think the Batman's far better. I mean, I'm not saying it should have been, even if it had Chadwick, But it's not even my favorite Marvel movie. I still think Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was far better. I even think the Miss Marvel Disney Plus show was better, even though I love that show. So it's better than Thor Love and Thunder because I didn't even like Thor Love and Thunder. So this movie was far better than that one. But that's my problem with the film. It was really missing T'Challa. It was missing Chadwick Boseman, and I believe every actor is replaceable. And yes, I know a man passed, and I love what they did with him in these tributes. You could have still done those tributes, especially the Marvel Studios intro. You could have had, like, at the end of the movie, in dedication of Chadwick Boseman, which they do that in the movie, so that, or in the credits, you can still do that. But you carry on T'Challa's story. You carry on what he had begun. You carry that on. And there was, I don't want to be that guy, but when they were referencing T'Challa's death, it just felt on the nose because there's this mystery disease, there's this mystery disease that's incurable. And I'm like, I don't know. This feels weird. Like, I don't know how... I'm not speaking for anyone, but if I'm a family member of Chadwick, I just would feel like that was way too on the nose almost. Like, it felt like it was just, you're doing something in this fictional story. It just felt too on the nose. And I don't know. I felt awkward about it. And I respect their attempt. But all I kept thinking throughout the film was this film would have been far better with T'Challa. And I'm not saying Chadwick, I'm saying T'Challa. Although it would have been better if it had Chadwick. But I'm just saying a T'Challa replacing Chadwick could have still gone that. And now let's talk about the post-credit. No spoilers, by the way, but stay tuned for the post-credit. There's only one post-credit. Technically, it's a mid-credit scene, but I don't care. They're the same shit. The post-credit scene is very beautiful. It's very emotional. It's amazing. It's really good. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna be vague about it because I don't think I should be revealing the post credit. But yeah, that's my entire review for the film. That's all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what do you think. I know the main thing everyone's gonna tell me is, oh, but they respect Chadwick, respect this. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I get your position, but continue T'Challa's story. I'm far more recast T'Challa now than I was before, and I still stand by that. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let us know in the comments what you think. I'll see y'all next time. Wakanda forever.